I felt like at the time, the reason I started it was because I would go to lunch with you and I would have this like amazing conversation, and then I would go like tell everybody about it. And so when I first started the first episode, I said, I think I'm going to do 10 of these. I'm just going to record conversations that I have because I think people would be interested. I felt like I had a really good network, but it was for me. It was like I just really enjoyed doing it. But I also knew, I saw the early signs that podcasting was going to be enormous. It's as transparent and like genuine of a conversation as you could have. Like when you think about watching the news, whatever your opinion on it is, I won't make that today, but you don't watch the news and then go, man, that's like how people talk to each other in real life.
Right. You're being spoken to.
You're being spoken to, and it's a show.
Right.
It's entertainment, to be honest with you. And I'm not saying podcasts can't be, but this is just a conversation. I think the way people digest it is they can build trust around it because they're not being spoken to. They're just like sitting in on a conversation.
Right.
You don't have to be able to watch it, so you can listen to it anywhere. You can listen to it on your commute, while you're working out, while you're walking. If it's video, you kind of have to be paused and watching.
Right.
Or a book or anything like that. And so it's the most mobile, on-demand way to learn anything. And the friction and the cost to actually start one is relatively low. So you can have a lot of people putting it out. It's like nobody can afford to create a news station. You need like millions of dollars and towers and big media centers.
And like Johnny said, we had a radio talk show host in here, and I was asking him about radio stations. He's like, man, I'm 28 years old, where I don't listen to the radio.
I know.
It's like, oh, is that really a thing? Yeah. Man, I feel even twice as old when you said that. I was like, wow, it never occurred to me. But it made me appreciate this medium too, because but there are a lot of podcasts, and we discussed one before we came in here too, they can be contrived and they can be developed for entertainment purposes for only. Sure. But I think there are plenty of these, right? I think kind of Rogan has kind of spearheaded that movement toward trying to get organic conversations in. And what types of things have you learned along the way? Because how many hundred?
I've done 320.
320 shows.
I have learned on one, I've just learned, I've gotten to talk to 320 people. So I've learned. Two, as a host, what I've learned is if you'll ask a question and then do a good job of just shutting up, people will tell you a lot.
Yeah.
And I think one muscle that's really hard, podcasts that I can't stand listening to, is when the host is constantly talking over and you see it all the time. It's actually hard to stay quiet, especially if you're like engaged. But it's usually like that extra second of not saying anything that like the goods keep coming out. Two, like I'm enjoying this conversation so much because most people don't get asked about their life very often. And I think people genuinely like talking about not themselves, but just kind of telling their story.
Yeah.
They don't get to do it very often. So giving people an opportunity, you'll find out crazy things and people will tell you a lot. I mean, those are probably two of the more like little nuanced things that I think anybody, whether you have a podcast or not, could take away from this, especially if you're starting a business.
Yeah. And I think you have tons to offer. And the fact that, I mean, that you have a show and I've been on your show and you've now been here. I think there's so much to learn from other people who have been somewhere where other people aspire to go.
For sure.
You know, but I think even your 18-year-old self would have lent an epiphany to somebody out there. Well, any story's got little nuggets in it.
For sure. And I think everybody I sometimes say, you're one good question away from changing your whole life. And so sometimes asking the best next question is the most life-changing thing.
Yeah.
And so even like if you go back to the risk we took, we were like, why are we still developing if we don't like it? like that might seem like, oh, that's an easy question to ask, but some people actually never ask the question. They just say, well, we're developing, so we're going to keep doing it. They never I'm using like an internal question.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking to a lender or you're talking to an investor and you say, they're just like, somebody that's really good at sales is usually good at like asking lots of questions. If you say, oh, well, we're not going to put money in your deal, well, why not? Then they start kind of going on and on about why not. Well, have you thought about this? Blah, blah, blah. The next question could totally change the reality of any situation. And I don't know if I did a really great job of explaining it, but you talk to really great hosts or really people that I think are influential. They're not characterized by the answers they give. They're always characterized by the questions they ask.
Yeah, I mean, you're leading them in a direction at least.
For sure.
But other people like you're an easy interview too. There's some people that have a hard time sitting in front of lights and cameras and actually being relaxed enough to have a normal conversation. And I'm sure, I don't know how your first podcasts were, but
so robot.
Yeah. Well, I can speak for myself too. And I'm not even saying I'm a pro yet, but after a certain amount of time, you feel more relaxed. You can kind of, groove into these things a little bit easier versus before. But where are you taking your podcast now? Are you turning it into a business, or is it still, it's still not a side project for you anymore as ambitiously as you're tackling it, right?
No, Johnny and I talk about this pretty often. It's grown. For the effort we've put into it to date, I would say we've knocked the cover off the ball. I think the way I think about it going forward is we're hitting between YouTube and audio almost 40,000 unique people a month. I think podcasting is one of the best business models in the world because it's very low overhead. It's very low cost to do.
Mm-hmm.
For me to go get the next few 100,000 listeners doesn't mean I have to go hire 30 people.
True.
It's like better than software. Like you actually don't have to scale the team up very much.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even necessarily have to go do a ton more episodes. You just have to market a little better. And then you have to have the team that can get the right guests on and the content right.
Right.
But where are we going to take it? I think we will professionalize it in 2024 even more than we have. From the guests that we have on, the way we deliver episodes to our audiences across all channels, having somebody that works on ads full time, or at least that's part of their job to sell. But really, the big thing is the best thing about having Fort Capital or another business is I can shine this podcast light on my business, and that drives recruiting. It drives capital raising. It drives deal flow. It drives all. So when people say like, how much is your podcast worth? I'm like, I'm not saying it's priceless, but it's like, it's not just the ad dollars. It's all the other things.
It's the eyeballs in general.
Correct.
Finding out who you are and what you do, and then finding more about what you do.
Correct. So I look at it as like this piece of work that I'll continue to work on the rest of my life. I can't envision a world where I'm not doing it.